Simon, thank you so much for joining me today for Happy Days with Callum Church. It's a pleasure to have you. I really appreciate you spending your time with me this evening to speak. Do you want to take a minute just to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Today I run a philanthropy project called the Purposeful Project, and our mission is to help 10 million people start a business of their own and not feel alone doing it. So, but I started my career at 15 years old when I was kicked out of home, I guess, and I left school, and I found out that I was an entrepreneur. And I never really thought that I was, or even understood what that meant, but it unlocked a future that I never knew was possible in my younger years. And I became an entrepreneur. I started 18 companies. The Purposeful Project is my 19th business. I've invested along the way in 69 startups. I just made a recent investment in a company called Peas and Pod. So I'm an angel investor. And I just love entrepreneurship. And I love helping people learn how to leverage entrepreneurship to give them a purposeful life.
How did you know that you were an entrepreneur when you were at such a young age? Obviously, there's sort of like a recipe for an entrepreneur, I'd say. But what sort of qualities did you identify in yourself that told you that?
Well, first of all, I would just say I think anyone can be an entrepreneur, which is, sometimes there's this whole like perception that entrepreneurs are some, they're Elon Musks, they're kind of, weirdos or something special or something different about them. And I think everybody is potentially an entrepreneur. No one's born anything. No one's born a doctor. No one's born a lawyer. All of these things require training, support, and guidance. And there are many different types of doctors, right? There are brain surgeons that must have steady hands. And there are GPs that must have empathy, general practitioners, call them in the UK, and each of these types of doctors are leveraging your core ability and then training on top to allow you to make that core ability really power up. So I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. My parents were both entrepreneurs, but actually for the first 0 to 14 years of my life, they programmed me to think that I should be a lawyer. Because to them, a lawyer was a regular paycheck, leveraging your intellect, and they didn't want me to be an entrepreneur, is my guess. But I didn't think I was one. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and then through a series of dramatic events that took place in my life, I basically was suddenly thrust into the world, and I had to make a living. And in that moment, something woke up in my brain. And I call it the entrepreneurial muscle. And I basically was literally in the streets, homeless, wondering what to do, hadn't eaten for 3 days. And I think that's what woke up this muscle in my brain, because suddenly I walked past this house in Cambridge in England where I was living homelessness. And I saw this house, this massive house with a really messy garden. And I thought to myself, that's weird. Why would someone with such a big house not be able to take care of their garden? And something in my mind went, maybe they just don't have time. I'll knock on the door and see if they want me to take care of their garden. And that's what I did. And to my shock and surprise, they said, yes, they did need a gardener. And it was great that I knocked on the door because they were looking for someone to take care of the garden. And they gave me the business. And then I basically did that 100 times in one day and managed to get 11 people to give me the job of taking care of their garden. And literally in one day, I was able to create a gardening company. And I realized as I contemplated this model that you can take something in your mind and make it real. And from that moment on, I have been obsessed and in love with entrepreneurship in every way.
When you say that you suddenly discovered that entrepreneurial muscle of yours, and you started having these ideas that you could convert into value, whatever way that be, would you say there's sort of like a degree of self-awareness that is attached to that? Because something which I find funny when I speak to people like yourself, or people that have succeeded or overcome extreme adversity, they do have a level of struggle. Obviously, you had a certain level of struggle before something triggered in you. So would you say that's a level of self-awareness that's developed through that struggle?
Yeah, I don't think I was very self-aware at 15 years old. I mean, I talk a lot about the word purpose in life. I don't think I discovered that word properly until I entered my 30s. But I think what is interesting is how some of the hardest things that ever happened to you in life can actually end up in some weird twist of fate being the best things that ever happened to you. So, you know, you often hear people telling stories about how they went bankrupt and how that made them realize how much they already had with the love of their family, or, you know, their health, for example. So I think that that's something, there's something in that, you know. I term it as, you know, bad luck is actually good luck. You know, Buddha once said, we're all going to have 10,000 hours of good luck and 10,000 hours of good luck, bad luck. And actually, I think there's but my personal view is that it's all a matter of perspective, right? What is good luck and what is bad luck? And I have since discovered that luck is hackable. You can actually create your own luck. It's got nothing to do with hard work, by the way. Hard work does not equal more luck. But it's definitely something, I think, for me that kind of I wasn't aware, I wasn't awake at 15, to answer your question. I wasn't that way inclined at that moment. It was literally survival. That my brain said, you've got to survive. There's something in your mind you've never used, and we're going to wake it up so that you can survive. And I think if a lot of people put themselves in that situation, they might be surprised what they're capable of doing. And until they are actually in that literal life or death situation, a lot of people do not wake up their brain properly. And that's why often people are not aware.
Once you hit that point and that muscle triggered in your brain, did you start sort of going after your dreams? Because there's a lot of young dreamers in the world at the moment. I think Generation Z is certainly a generation of dreamers. I think we all want to achieve. So a lot of people don't know how quite to go about it. Was that something that you were pursuing in that moment when that muscle triggered?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, again, these words now like dream and aspiration and all of these, and purpose I use a lot. Yeah, they're words I've been lucky enough to now build into my life. But I think initially it was just survival. And there's something really interesting in that. There's a lot of stats around about how businesses that are well funded often don't win over businesses that are not as well funded, which might surprise a lot of people. You know, why would a business that's well funded lose against a business that's not as well funded? And it's an interesting dynamic of like where people get gritty, they get in the trenches, they fight. And I think because I've come from nothing, there's something in that. There's something like, and one part of it is, I've personally done a lot of research on this. So what makes people successful? And I think a large part of that is you're willing to lose it all. And a lot of people, as they get an education, they feel they must use that education, or they get a job, they feel they must use that experience, or they've got some savings and they must keep that money safe. And as they build up these things that they think matter, they restrict their ability to do incredible things. And I think the key is you've got to be willing to risk it all to be successful. And the good news for me was I lost it all at 15. I lost my 3 brothers and the connection I had with them. I lost my father. I lost connection with my mother. And in a way, I didn't have any money. So I kind of had nothing to lose, right? I lost my friend network at that time, you know, and there's something both very sad at the time, but equally freeing and incredibly magical about just having nothing to lose. You know, I knock on that door and that person says no, I've lost nothing. But if I knock on that door and that person says no, and I had to go tell everybody else that this person won't give me the business because I'm an idiot, it's something a little bit more difficult about that for people. So losing it all, I think, is a real key element, like being willing to. And as you go up the food chain now, you look at companies like Google, one of the reasons companies like Google are still doing so well is they're permanently looking at ways of cannibalizing themselves, right? The iPhone cannibalized the iPod. You know, if the iPod was a brilliant, best-selling product, but Steve Jobs recognized that by bringing an iPhone out, yes, iPod sales wouldn't be as big, but they would evolve and become a bigger business. So he was willing to eat his own lunch, right? Whereas Sony would never have come out of a product to cannibalize the best-selling Walkman of all time, right? Why would they do that? So the mindset of being willing to lose it all, I think, is key to what triggered my brain to wake up.
That's interesting, and I think it's for me, from my perspective. Look, I'm a young white male, grown up incredibly privileged. You know, I'm a pretty comfortable guy. What do I need to do in order to get into that space in order for me to succeed as a person? Because like you say, there's a lot of people that succeed in the world that have come from that struggle, you know, where there's no other choice but to survive. But, you know, they have to they've succeeded because of their discomfort. What do I need to do, to try and get myself to that point where these other people are, as a comfortable person?
Yeah, it's quite hard to be general when you don't know someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems with advice is that people that have a certain experience will often give you the advice based on their certain experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the problems with, I guess, gurus that stand up on a pedestal and start telling you how you should do things. It is a very personal journey. I can only say from my own personal experience, what I always recommend to people is, I think the first thing is try to recognize that your subconscious makes a lot of your decisions for you. Just begin to recognize that. Realize that whatever you were brought up around, particularly the 0 to 7 years in your life, whatever your 0 to 7 years were, your subconscious has a program. So for example, if your parents are permanently talking about money problems, or talking about how it's important to get an education, that will sink into your subconscious, and that will be what you call your belief system, right? So in some respects, it's recognizing, like, you're breathing right now. You might be scared of spiders. Why would you be scared of spiders, right? But your subconscious had some experience, 0 to 7, with spiders that made you subconsciously be fearful of spiders, right? So I think one thing I say to people is begin to recognize your subconscious is controlling a lot of your belief systems, your subconscious bias, for example, or your belief about how the world works. So for example, you might think getting a mortgage when you're young is the right thing to do. Get a house, get debt. This is normal, leverage debt. These things are your subconscious. They're not necessarily what's correct for you. So accept that. The other thing I would say after that, if you can begin to open up your subconscious and realize what your subconscious biases are, for example, then I think exposure to as much of life as you can, as early as you can, is the answer to really finding out what your purpose is in life. So, the obvious one is the gap year, I think, every single successful person will tell you about an experience they had that shaped them, that made them do what they're doing. I mean, Steve Jobs used to talk about going on these incredible trips and doing drugs, which I do not recommend. I've never done drugs in my life. I'm not at all suggesting you do drugs, but that's what he did, and he had these experiences that I think shaped him into that obsessive genius that he was. And so I always say to people, don't get a mortgage when you're young. Instead, go and experience the world. Go live in India for a month. Go spend a week walking the Great Wall of China. Do it with a backpack on your back, and hustle on the way. Do odd jobs to make it work. Don't say money's stopping you. That's just an excuse. And I think, and then the final thing I'd probably say, and this gets a bit controversial, but if I was giving what I tried to do when I give advice to young people is try things, and try things that your parents don't like you trying. That might be starting your own business and dropping out of school. It might be whatever it is you feel like, hey, there's something I really like about this thing, whether it's traveling, whether it's starting a business, whether it's going to work for someone who you admire, whatever it is, take those risks young. The more risk you take, the luckier you get, is true. So take lots of risk before you have a lot of responsibility, ideally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I'm trying to do as much as I can, is just be a bit of a yes man, say yes to things, and immerse myself in as many opportunities as I can. It's partly one of the reasons why I run this podcast, among others, is to speak to some cool people like yourself and learn things along the way, so that's awesome. What's helped you succeed the most in your own journey personally for you? What's been like, say, the key lesson? I mean, you've spoken about stuff about your subconscious and mastering that. Has there been any key lessons that have seen that that you've used the most along your journey to launch you into the success that you've had?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the kind of the Instagram quotey kind of stuff, and then there's the deep, meaningful stuff. Which
let's do the deep, meaningful stuff. Let's get into it.
The deep, meaningful stuff is tricky to explain, but and I think that it again, it's about personal life experience. But I think for example, I moved to Hong Kong when I was 23 years old, and it completely, it was no, it was, you know, I told you earlier about I was 15 years old and something woke up in my brain, and I learned that I had this ability to create something in my head and make it real. This entrepreneurship, that's all entrepreneurship really is, right? Having an idea in your head and making it real. And actually, as I perfected that process, I took a chance and moved to Hong Kong. I moved to Hong Kong in 1997 when Hong Kong was getting handed back to the Chinese from the British, and everybody else was leaving Hong Kong. All the British people were leaving Hong Kong. So I moved back to England, by the way, when Brexit happened. So I always like to go the opposite way, whatever's going on. But when I moved to Hong Kong, I for the first time, I think it woke up something else in my brain, which was this kind of like, if you're going to think big, if you're going to think big. You know, Hong Kong is one of these incredible cities that it's the second most expensive city in the world to live. For anyone that's been there, you're going to know what I mean. It is built on pure brain power. It has no natural resources. And so it's not like England. England actually has a lot of natural resource, and so does America. Places like, but Hong Kong competes with London, New York as a financial hub. And I just remember arriving there and sitting on the harbour front and looking at this city and reading its history, and I just realized how big the world was, you know. And I think that definitely helped me realize that there is a big world, and don't be confined by the town you grew up in or the city you grew up in or the culture that you grew up in. Don't let these things confine you. And I think that I think that's one of my reasons for success is I enjoyed submerging myself in what I thought was alien to me. Before I left for Asia, I had this image that Chinese people were, you know, it was all communists, you know, like they were all this kind of like weird, not allowed more than one child. I didn't quite know how that could possibly be real culture, right? And they were so different from me. And then when I went out there, I realized they were no different from me. You know, they love their children, they eat 3 meals a day, they breathe oxygen, they have aspirations, and the communism mindset that we're kind of told is the way they live is their government. It's not them, right? So I think that's definitely, and the second thing I think that helped me is always learning stuff. You know, like whatever I believe is true, I still question it all the time. Yeah. So how money works, for example, when I was younger, I felt money would make me happy. There was no doubt I thought money would solve all my problems. And as I've made a lot of money, I realized that money doesn't. So what does make you happy? You know, but that evolution of yourself is quite important, I think. And then I think the final thing that I did that kind of probably made me a success is I found the right life partner.
Okay. And
I think this is something underrated. Almost, I know everyone says they want to find love, but I think not sure everyone's willing to make the effort. And I think that there is, I really feel like I got someone in my life who really puts me first. And I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but you know, I just feel like if you meet someone that wants you to be better, wants to help you be better, then it's a very special thing. And so, you know, I want that for everyone, because I really believe that that's led me to open my mind. I mean, for example, I've taken some incredible business risks, and my partner will always say to me, I trust you, Simon. I'm behind you. You know, if we end up broke, we end up broke, you know, but let's try it. Right. And when you've got someone like that in your life, that is game changing. Now, that could be your mother or your father or your brother or your friend. But having someone like that in your life, I think, is the reason I'm successful. Someone that just blind faith believed in me and educated me and helped me and guided me has been game changing.
Yeah, that's really sweet. I love that point. Beautiful. I've noticed that you push entrepreneurship a lot online. You know, you've got a little following on TikTok, which we're currently live with at the moment. I see you on Instagram, all over the place, you know, and you push entrepreneurship a lot. Why is that?
Well, I feel like I can see the future. And that's a very arrogant statement, maybe, but I can see what's coming. I think one of the traits of entrepreneurship is the ability to see the future. You can see what people are going to need, right? But I can see the suffering that's coming, and I want to be a part of making sure that suffering doesn't happen. So I see, for example, incredible technology that's already started. We're already starting to see how it's disrupting the world. If you want examples, look at the Rust Belt in America, you know, and if people aren't finding purpose in their day-to-day anymore, awful things can happen. And so I saw a few years ago when I sold my last company, Fluid, to PwC, the accounts company, and I was free, you could say. I sold my company, I had money, and I thought, right, what should I do? And I was a bit lost for a while, and then I started reading about all of these technologies that were coming. And I read this article about a machine that was going to replace doctors. And it's incredible. I've actually followed it quite carefully since. And basically, there's not going to be a need for doctors anymore. This machine will predict what's wrong with you better than a doctor ever will.
Wow.
And actually, it's more accurate than a doctor. You think about a doctor as a model. First of all, doctors right now can't even see people because of corona. But that side, before that, you know, if the doctors had a night before, maybe she had a bad night and she didn't sleep very well, and then she wakes up the next day, goes to work and has to diagnose what's wrong with someone, well, you know, quite often they can get the diagnosis wrong. In addition, you know, and this has happened in Africa with Ebola, for example, but, oh, you've got a cold, go home. But if they had cloud computing telling you there's 25 people that have all got sick with the same symptoms in the last 18 hours, they wouldn't tell them to go home and infect all their families. They'd say, hold on a minute, this is something else, right? This isn't a cold, this is Ebola. And so technology has the ability to predict what's wrong with us. Anyway, that's an incredible thing. That could mean, for example, that places that can't afford doctors or can't educate people to become doctors could now potentially have a doctor in their village, in their town, right? It's incredible. But that also means that a lot of doctors are going to lose their job. People that are training right now in university, spending 8 years learning to be a doctor, are going to get replaced by a machine. And that's what, you know, let's call that the kind of like the intellectual end. The non-intellectual end, the execution end, you've got truck drivers. 3.5 million people in the US alone are employed based on driving, right? That's all going to get taken over by whatever company, Tesla probably, are going to be, you know, cars are going to be driving themselves within 10 years. It's already possible. But the legislation, the rules, the superhighways, all going to get built. And in 10 years' time, there's going to be no driving jobs. So what are those people going to do? Right. And I think entrepreneurship is the answer, because entrepreneurship isn't just about, you know, building a business and, you know, being Elon Musk. Being an entrepreneur is about finding something you love and doing it every day. Right. And that could be a small business that you just enjoy, or it can be a big business that makes the world a better place. But it's the answer. And I don't feel like schools teach people how to be entrepreneurs. We all know the school system is 100 years old. It really was designed kind of in the Henry Ford era to give people enough of an education that were aspirational and they wanted to buy a car and they wanted to go on holidays in that car, but not aspirational enough that they would go out there and take risk and learn about money management and learn about building a brand, because that's going one step too far. No one would work in the factories if they learn those things. The school doesn't teach people those things, right? But it needs an update. So my initial thought was to go into politics and try and change it from the government side out. But then I realized that I can't lie, and politicians need to get vote. And so I thought to myself, is there another way I can do this? So I thought, why don't I disrupt it from the outside? They always say you can't put a fire out of a house from the inside the house. So, you know, my idea was, okay, I'll stand outside the house and put this fire out, and I'll create a platform that educates people around entrepreneurship, so they have those tools and the ability to not get disrupted by technology, but just as important, find purpose by being in control of their own destiny.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about fulfillment now, because that word again, purpose, it's come up again, and it's something which you talk about a lot. What's the significance of purpose and having a purpose and working towards a purpose?
Well, I think it's a tricky word. And I think purpose, when I was 15 years old, my purpose was survival. Yeah. Okay. And I basically wanted to eat and have a place to sleep that was safe. Right. And I think there's nothing wrong with that motivation. But I think there comes a point where what happens if from what I've seen and what I now know from my own personal life journey is that if you are able to contemplate the word purpose and then get involved in things that have purpose, you are more motivated, you are happier, and you can sustain what you're doing for longer. So, and one of the things about hacking luck, one of the ways to get more luck in life is persistence. And so a lot of people, we've probably all seen those Instagram graphics where the guy's digging for gold and he's just about to get there. He's turned around and walked away, right? We've all seen that graphic probably flying around. And so the truth is that people, if their purpose is just money, I've seen it time and time again, often people give up when it gets too hard because money itself isn't going to, they can get money elsewhere, right? But if the purpose, and I call this the destination, if the destination is powerful enough, then you will push through any of the pain to get there. So in my case, partly my purpose, I had to go through a certain set of experiences to realize what my purpose was. So I had to start a business on my own at 15 years old, find it lonely, find it hard, realize school had not taught me anything of value, realize that none of the things that I needed to know to make life work were given to me in education, go through the process, come out the other side successful, having made money, having proved myself as an entrepreneur, to look back and reflect and say, hey, I can go back to that 15-year-old me and help, right? There's no reason in this day and age why people have to start businesses on their own. There's no reason why people should be paying for business school. There's no reason. It's all out there for free. So why shouldn't there be a platform to give people all that knowledge for free? So at that point, I know my purpose, right? I've gone through this whole cycle, and my purpose is to go back to that 15-year-old me and help myself, right? But because I have that energy of, and I know what my purpose is, I'm willing at 9 p.m. on a Monday night to be on here with you, because I know this is a big part of how you think too, right? And what you're trying to teach your audience, right?
Yeah,
and I don't even think twice about it. You know, I don't need to know anything other than your purpose aligns with mine. Here I am, how can I help? And that's the power of purpose. When you don't have purpose, the way it normally goes is, okay, how much are you going to pay me to be on your podcast? And why, what's in it for me? And, but when you have purpose and you hear someone else has purpose, you just, the energy of it is completely different. And it actually makes your life better, which is why you see, and I don't want to cast a brush over to the same people. I see bankers, for example, that often are very unhappy. They're making lots of money, but they don't have a purpose other than to sell mortgages to people who don't need it, and that I see that in their soul, and that's the thing I'm trying to get across. If you want to live a happy, fulfilled life, it actually comes from within, and I think that from within power comes from purpose.
Would you say that your life is currently a fulfilled life at the moment? Obviously, you're not at the end of your life just yet, Simon, but would you say you're on track to live a fulfilled life then in that case?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because when you ask it, two things go through my mind. There is, no one's life is perfect, right? So anyone that tells you their life is perfect is either lying or there's something wrong with them. I think that what I can say is that I'm pretty happy with where my life is at. And there's a couple of important things for me. One is I'm free to do what I want to do every day. Freedom is key for me. And half the time I'm not thinking about, can I make money? I'm thinking about, can I sustain the ability to do what I want to do every day? That's a personal, selfish core need I have. Now I've experienced it. I don't want someone else telling me when to fly somewhere or when to do something, or I don't want any of those restrictions. The second thing is having someone in my life that I love and that loves me, and that takes effort, right? Both sides. But that to me, is one of those ways I measure whether or not I'm satisfied. And then I recently had a little boy. He's 3.5 years old, and do I get time to spend with him beyond my own selfish need to work and my own desire to spend time with my wife, who I love? Am I putting important time aside to be with him and help him become the person that I want him to support him to become. You know, a good person who cares about other people, who has empathy. Am I doing that? And so I have those things. So I would say I am happy, Callum. Yeah. I would say I have those things. But of course, there's days when, you know, it's stressful, and no one's life, I don't care, you know, if you're a millionaire, as I am, and money doesn't solve all your day-to-day problems. I still have problems, right?
Yeah.
But I would say overarching, I wouldn't change a single thing about my life.
See, this is exactly why I was so keen to get you on the podcast, actually, because I saw one of your TikToks, and you said, you know, in that TikTok, it was something along the lines of, you know, I've had this success, but what's it all built up to? The reason why I do all of this is for my son, and you brought your son into it. And for me, it sounds strange me saying this as a 20-year-old bloke, you know, because I'm young, but actually my purpose for entrepreneurship is just like yours. You know, it's to allow myself to have that freedom which you have right now. And one of my dreams is to raise a son, you know, just like you're doing, and I want to raise that son as you're doing, to be a good man first of all, and someone who has really decent core values and just a good person, you know. And I can't tell you where this dream comes from as a 20-year-old bloke. I can't tell you where, but I just found that TikTok quite moving in a way, really, because it was something that it really resonated with me personally. And I've got a girlfriend as well who I love a lot. I really do. And I do it for her in some ways as well. And we're not even living together at the moment, you know, like we're young people. So it's funny where that comes from. I was going to ask you, do you know where that comes from? For me, because this is something I'm searching personally. Obviously, we don't know each other so well personally, but I'm wondering if it's something that maybe you could relate to when you were younger, maybe, or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. By the way, on my TikTok, people are saying you've got incredible emotional intelligence, which I can agree with more. And I know it's cheesy, but I do think there's wise soul syndrome in some people, and in other people, this subconscious stuff when you're young, I think plays such a huge role. I don't know your parents, but I'm pretty sure, you know, they've instilled something in you 0 to 7. Maybe they were very loving, maybe they weren't, and you learned something from that. You know, whatever it is, you took, you know, it's one of the stories I like is there's this guy who has twins. Well, probably his wife that had the twins, but they have twins, and they and the twins growing up. Now, unfortunately, it turns out the father is a drunk, and the two twins grow up. And then they leave home, and one grows up to be an awful drunk. And the other one grows up to be a successful, happy person who gives back to society and builds facilities to help people that have got caught up in the addiction of alcohol, and does all these incredible things. And then they're both interviewed for a story, and the interviewer asks, you know, the person who you know, really doing well, you know, why are you doing so well? And he says, well, my father was a drunk. And then they go and interview the other twin who's, you know, a drunk and having a really tough time, and said, why do you think you're in this situation? You know, why is it like this for you? And he said, well, my father is a drunk. You know, and basically, I think sometimes it depends on your frame of mind, how you take the experiences that are given to you. So my guess is with you, that you took the positive and you saw what was good, and you decided you wanted to replicate it or improve upon it. That's my guess. But yeah, I mean, for me, I often, you know, it's kind of interesting, because I remember at one time I was working really hard, and my wife said to me, why are you working so hard? I don't see you. And I'm doing it for us.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when what you're talking about there goes the wrong way, when you start, because she's like, no, you're doing it for you. I don't see you anymore. You know, you're working all the time. And that's one of the reasons I actually left Hong Kong and sold a few businesses and spent a bit more time. I don't, you know, you can get caught up in this I'm doing it for other people thing and go too far the other way, I think. You know, basically I still do a lot of what I do, I still do for myself. I think what I'm trying to do at the same time is make my son proud of me. That's different to doing it for him.
Yeah.
I want him to have a good role model, and I'm hoping that he can, take what I'm doing and have a really big impact on helping people that might, for example, get displaced by technology later. Whatever he decides to do is up to him. But conceptually, he'll see that giving back through my example is more powerful than taking.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing it as an education for him, but I'm still doing it for me, right? So I think there's that balance, isn't there? Who are you actually doing it for?
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned the word there, balance, work-life balance, because obviously your family is really important for you. You work for your family in a way. How do you get that balance right? Or even so, is there even a balance at all? Or is it just a merging of the two in some sort of way? Because this is something I'm trying to figure out myself personally. So I'm just wondering what your take on that is.
Yeah, it's a very complicated subject, actually. And what I would say, first of all, surface-wise, is the surface Instagram quote is there is no work-life balance, there's just life, right? That's the Instagram quote. The underneath bit, the more complicated bit, is that the way I see balance is this week, I'm doing something really big on my platform, and I've had to work really hard. It's Monday today, wherever your time your podcast goes out, but last week I worked non-stop, right? Non-stop. And I kind of told my wife and my son, for that matter, and a few friends, I'm really busy this week. This is what I'm working on, right? And then next week I will get back in the gym and I will spend a bit more time on my health. And I think what I'm trying to illustrate here is that there is almost a day-to-day adjustment needed. And I personally, and I'm not saying this is a good idea, but this is what I personally have done. When I was building companies, and I didn't have my son, so I think it's different when you have kids, but when I was building my companies, I made my wife part of my business, right? And to me, that made life a lot easier. So my wife and I had a company called Fluid together, and we were working till midnight, 1, 2 in the morning on that business. And that meant I wasn't at 6 p.m. having to make a phone call. I'm sorry, I've got to work another 8 hours now. Don't leave me. It will work out. She was there with me, and then we'd order takeaway and we'd have a laugh, and then we'd make paper airplanes and throw them at each other, and we'd have fun in the office, working on something together that ultimately does benefit us both, right?
Yeah.
And I think that to me is the ideal work-life balance. And so, for example, on my own podcast, my son jumps in and joins in, and sometimes when I'm making videos, he'll jump in and join in, and I don't scold him for that or exclude him. And I find it to be a lot easier if you just accept that family, life and work are the same thing, and just merge the two and get a partner that accepts that. Right. And a lot of people struggle with when I'm investing in people, I always tell people one of the tricks to deciding whether or not to invest in people is not go look at their business plan. The number one hack for deciding whether or not to invest in a business is meet the partner of the founder of the company.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you meet the partner or the founder of the company, you're going to understand the real pressures that they're on. So, for example, if that person, that partner is like, oh, this person's, he's doing a startup, but I'm sure it will fail. And if it does, as soon as it does, we can get back to normal. And I like traveling business class, and now we can't because they're doing, alarm bells. Like you realize they're going to have every night they're going to have that partner in their life, and they're going to have to make a decision: the partner in their life or the business, right? Yeah. And that's not an easy decision for anybody. And I wouldn't put that decision on anybody. The point is, you don't, as a person, you don't want to be held back by your personal life. And that's why I think it goes wrong for people. Their personal life is separated from their business life, and one or the other suffers. And I see it time and time again. I see many examples. I always want to pick on lawyers, but I see many lawyers that seem like they have the dream job when they're 20. And in their 30s and 40s, one, they're selling time instead of buying time, which is really tricky to scale. And second, quite often they probably make a choice in their life, and I can see it. They either have gone for the career and they hardly see their family, or they've gone for their family and they resent the fact their career didn't go as far because of it, right? Because they've not combined the two, because it's probably not easy to bring your kids into the courtroom, right?
Yeah.
And whatever, you know, whatever the restrictions are in those disciplines. But you know, for me, I think I stay sane by making my work and my life the same thing.
Yeah. Is that easy to do? I mean, for me, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking that might be quite complicated.
It's more complicated than doing it the other way.
Yeah, that's
Trust
true.
me.
Yeah.
If your partner is involved in your business, there are a couple of rules to it, right? Of course, ideally they do something different to you. They have a different skill set. Or they're working on their thing, you're working on your thing, but you're doing it together. And I think it's a lot easier than the other way around, which is, you know, 6 p.m. Oh, why aren't you, no dinner? You're coming over dinner? Oh, I'm going to chuck it in the bin then. You know, like, you know, it's a lot easier to have them involved in what you're doing than keep them separate. And I know a lot of people do it, keep it separate, and they go mad. They get divorced. Someone on my TikTok right now is saying, yeah, that happened to me. I got a divorce. You can't, it's not smart to keep them separate, I don't think.
Do you ever really switch off with the business? I mean, you know, like, because what I envision when you say about bring your partner into the business, I instantly think, oh no, we're going to be talking business when we're at home, you know, when we're supposed to be chilling out. So is that
Wicked.
something?
No.
Yeah, you see that as a good thing?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, to be honest, if you're with someone, and I've got 3 brothers who all got divorced, right? And I know why they got divorced. And the main reason is that they were not a partnership, right? When you're with someone, to me, it's a partnership. Whatever you do in your life will affect them, right? In every way. So, you know, your reputation will affect them because they're with you. What you achieve will affect them for obvious reasons, right? So I just see it as an elongation of the existing agreement that we're in this together. And actually, even by law, when you get divorced, they get 50% of what you've got anyway. So why not make them part of making that 100% thing happen?
Yeah.
And so I personally, I mean, there are stages. Okay. So I worked every single day, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day for 10 years with my wife. And she wasn't my wife when we were working together that way. But what I loved about it, it's a bit like when you move in with someone. When you move in with someone, you really get, you know, they can't hide, you know, whether they're messy or not. They can't, you know, you get to see who they are in the morning without the makeup or whatever, you know, you get to know them, right? And I feel that that's really where you start to really fall in love, because you kind of really know them and you still love them even though you've seen their flaws, right? And I feel like there's a next level again when you get into business with your partner. Because, you know, example, in 2003, my wife and I, we had the business in Hong Kong, and we had SARS hit, which was coronavirus 1.0.
Yeah. And
major financial devastation. Hong Kong kind of seized up and everyone stopped paying everybody. And I remember like it was yesterday, you know, I said to my wife, you know, we can't make payroll this month. And we've got our own rent to pay and own stuff to do, you know, what should we do? She's like, we've got to pay everybody first. We've got to find a way. So let's get our overdrafts maxed out. You know, people have to get paid, right? And in that moment, I just discovered something about her that you can't know until those moments, right? A lot of people, I don't care. And I know, and again, I'm thinking of one of my neighbors, for example, who I know, you know, they go to their office and they're very different to the person they are when they come home. And you'll never know till you get divorced, whether or not they're ruthless or not. Right. And I knew in that moment how good my wife was. You know, that if push came to shove between her and I, she'd always try and do the right thing as long as I'd done the right thing by her. It wasn't about, no, we've got to survive some. This is about, we've got to forget, you know, let's fire everyone. And, you know, it is what it, no. She wanted to find a way to pay everybody properly and do the right thing by people, you know. And not only did that make me want to be a better person, but it also highlighted to me what a good person she is. And I wouldn't have had that experience if I hadn't worked with her, right? And so I think it's an underrated next level to actually team up with your partner. And I know some people will say, oh, I couldn't imagine working with my partner. Well, you know, you wait till you have a kid together then. If you can't work in a company together, you can't have a kid together, trust me. I would say we never had any arguments in business, but my wife and I, since having a kid, we do have some disagreements. But luckily our business structures helped us get through those disagreements.
Interesting. That's been a really interesting talking point, and not something really where you really see people talk about enough, or not from my perspective anyway. I think that's quite interesting. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move it on now, because I've got a couple more questions left for the podcast before we wrap it up. So just summarizing really, Simon, what's your advice for living a happy, fulfilled life?
My personal opinion on this sort of question is a good question, and I think it's hard to answer, but my personal opinion is be authentic.
Okay, yeah.
I think, and I'm not saying I've always personally, in my younger years, I remember when I went to Hong Kong, and I went to an area in Hong Kong called Lan Kwai Fong, and in Hong Kong it is quite financially driven, and I went to this place called Lan Kwai Fong, which is where all the cool bars and restaurants are. And I met this kind of stunning girl, and I was kind of like, wow, you know, you're so beautiful. And I was talking to her, and I was like, oh, and she said to me, you know, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. She went, oh, so you can't get a job? And there was a part of me that was kind of, for that moment, I was suddenly, I wanted to be someone else for a second, you know, like,
yeah.
I wanted to be the rich bankers that were, you know, waiting in the queue behind me to talk to her. And like, there was a moment like, how can I bolster myself up here and like explain how much money I'm potentially going to make, you know? So there's those moments where you get tempted to not be authentic. But equally, at that moment, even at that age, I was like, well, I love entrepreneurship, and it's not all about making money, and I like being free, and I choose this lifestyle. It wasn't forced upon me because I can't get a job. And anyway, point being that I think, you know, if you can be authentic through your life and hold that line, be true to yourself, it's special. And I think social media sometimes is a bit like that beautiful woman I was mentioning in Lan Kwai Fong. You know, it can tempt you to try and be something else. And I suggest people try to stay authentic and be yourself, accept the things you don't know, say the things you don't know, get help. I think the strongest people in this world ask for help. And I think, you know, seek out therapy if you need it. You shouldn't be embarrassed to say these things and do these things. You know, be yourself. And I think that will lead to a certain friend circle that will eventually lead, in my view, to happiness.
Yeah.
You don't have to pretend to be you've got it all together lawyer. I'm picking on lawyers and bankers a bit. You don't
Poor
have
guys.
To pretend, yeah, poor guys and girls. You don't have to pretend to be something. You can just be yourself, and that, in my view, makes life a lot simpler.
Just quickly before I ask my final question, how do we find our authentic selves? How do we find our true selves? Because this is also something I'm trying to work on myself, actually, funnily enough. I'm asking these questions purely for my own benefit here, because I'm trying to be as authentic as I can, and I'm trying to discover who I am as a person. Do you have any advice for sort of like finding that? Any tips or your experience?
First of all, you know, I can tell that you are getting there. The important thing is you're asking the question. Mm-hmm. See, a lot of people don't ask the question. What they do is they think they chase money, for example, mm-hmm. and money's not the only thing people chase, but they chase money in the hope that that money is going to allow them to discover who they are, right? And actually, that journey starts a lot longer. I know a lot of people that have made a lot of money, and you know, money basically only makes you happy if you're already happy. So if you get money and you're unhappy, or you haven't found your inner peace, it can make it worse, right? And I've seen this in people close in my own family. Money has made them more miserable, because all it's done is 10x their existing misery.
Yeah.
Right. So actually, before you get money, you want to ask the question you're asking yourself there: who am I? What am I about? What is my moral code? What is the authentic me? But give yourself a break as well, and accept that you are still growing up. You're still discovering that. You've got plenty of time. That's why I tell people to travel, for example, because that can give you a natural development. You know, like in your mind, you might be thinking, oh, India, oh no, you know, full of people of COVID right now and poverty. And then you go there, and I spent a lot of time in India, and you're like, wow, these are the most generous people I've ever met. They literally bring you into their home and feed you, give you a place to sleep. They care, you know, and your subconscious bias gets wiped by experience, right? So I think, the first step is ask the question you're asking of yourself. The second step is go out there and give yourself experiences. Anything you believe to be true is probably not. And go out there and experience it to find out whether it's true or not, right?
Awesome. Yeah, I recently had a travel YouTuber on the podcast, actually, a guy called Luke Demont, and he's totally changed my perspective on what India was. You make these assumptions in your mind from the movies, Slumdog Millionaire and stuff like that, and it's totally different country. It's beautiful, and I do hope to go there in the next few years. So that's awesome. Final question now, Simon, just to wrap up the podcast. It's totally cliche, totally subjective to everyone, but it's a lot of fun to ask. I want to ask you, what's your meaning of life, Simon?
Well, I think the purpose of life is a life with purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that the meaning of life, therefore, is to have a purpose. And in the pursuit of purpose is the journey that everyone should put themselves on. And so, yeah, that's my answer. I think, the meaning of life is such a funny question, but I do think that sometimes, again, there's lots of books written on this, like living in the now, appreciating what you've got, not always thinking your bad luck is bad luck, sometimes maybe seeing it as good luck, fix your perspective. And these things give you meaning, and that can lead to a meaning in your life.
Awesome. Simon, thank you so much for joining me for the past hour. It's been a really, really good chat, actually. And, it's been certainly valuable to me. So I know it's going to be valuable to all the people listening. So, Simon, thank you so much for joining me, mate.
Pleasure, mate. Really enjoyed chatting to you.
So there you go. That's the end of the show. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe on your podcasting app of choice so you can download and listen as each episode is released. If this episode helped you in any way, tell your friends, tell your family, maybe even leave a cheeky review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show. But that's all for now. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next episode, released shortly. Take care.